A long time ago in ancient times too, you find people looked at power itself, because there are people born in every generation who really crave power. And it's not just for riches in itself, but they crave power, and they'll often do it through military. Even before they really have real armies, some guy would arise and try to get the local band to follow him into battle and conquer something and take something over. But he always needed more and more men, and men tend to get fed up and go home unless you have a monetary system in place. So there were other people who realized that money was the key to everything. If you run money, then the military and politics and everything else fell into your pocket naturally. So the systems always coexisted down through the ages. Money always trumped, of course, and that's how it is today. It's the same thing. That's why Rothschild himself, when he was offered, to run the British bank, the central bank, he says, just give me control of the money. I don't care, what politics are made or who makes the laws, because obviously they'd have to be his men in the first place. They'd all have to come to him for loans for the country. That was the whole idea of having the central bank established in those times. So money always triumphs. But it's not just money. See, we always think when we see some scam going on, some giant scam, that we can understand greed. We understand greed, you see. But so we tend to use that and cover all the nasty things that are happening. It's just pure greed that they're putting out GMO foods, for instance. That's all it is, you think, for bigger bucks for them and making things easier and cheaper, or whatever it happens to be, or the inoculations, the mass inoculations that the big pharmas managed to con. Well, they didn't really con the governments. I believe they're all working in collusion, to be honest with you. And they use billions of dollars of taxpayers' money to get these vaccines, which are useless, for a flu that didn't even exist. We understand that part, but what was the real intent of it, apart from making money? Money is a secondary object. It's really to get something else into your system. People would rather believe it's just greed before they'll come to the second part and say, well, maybe they wanted to inject something else into us. That's our nature. We tend to look at the brighter side. We're egocentric, as they say, and we're also egocentric. We've been trained to be. Don't look at the negative, look at the positive. And we've also been trained in a social system, which is true socialism, which really means that you're trained to believe that there are special people who are better than you, who are come out of different wombs, and who are up there to serve you better and take care of big problems which are too difficult for you to understand, and leave it all to them and they'll make everything all right. That's how we're basically trained. And we don't realize now that we're post-democratic, not that they've ever had democracy, but we're post-democratic. Before that, to give us the semblance of having an input into big affairs that were going to affect us. But it always came down to just vote in this party or vote in that party according to what they promised. And it's no secret that if you promise the world to the masses will take it. They never get it, of course, but they certainly get the shysters that get in, the ones that they vote for. But you've had one agenda continuing on over centuries, party after party, and the same agenda goes on. They don't toss out the last bunches, bad laws, and start afresh. No, they keep them going and add more to them along the same direction. Well, something stinks, obviously, when that goes on. And as I've said many times, Jefferson pointed this out, that when you see an agenda basically going on from party to party as they change the House of Congress from one to the other, the same agenda goes on, then you'll know you're under tyranny. And that's exactly what's been going on for an awful long time. As I say, Professor Carroll Quigley documented his heroes that he worked for, really, his real bosses, the CFR and the Royal Institute of International Affairs, and in 2 books, Tragedy and Hope and the Anglo-American Establishment. And he was all for them bringing in this wonderful utopia for those who were fittest to survive. He believing, of course, he was one of them. And he documented a lot of the stuff they'd been up to. He said that they had such an impact on directing history and directing the world including world wars. They had so much to do with it that it should not be left in secret. He says it's time the public knew. I mean, he thought the public would praise them, to be honest with you. So that's what runs the world. And of course, those guys themselves are run at the top by a capstone. They love pyramids and phallic symbols and stuff down through the ages. But they have a capstone, and we do know that near the capstone are the international bankers, and those who formed the original Royal Institute of International Affairs were international bankers with a particular inner religion of their own. A club, you might say, or a sect. And they've run the world this way ever since. They do believe that science, if there is any deity out there, that science will lead them to it. They believe that nature has to be basically dissected, torn apart, understood, and then rearranged for power for themselves. And they also say that they're here to perfect that which was left imperfect. That is the world and everything in it. So genetic interference and so on is right up their alley. This is all part of their traditional religion. It's very, very old, by the way. Very old indeed. But they needed our help along the ways to help break down their sciences for them and perfect it, because everything is knowledge, knowledge is power, and that's what they use. When you realize that universities for an awful long time have been used for, I hate the word research. Research means that you're doing a research on something that obviously was searched before. But they do use them on certain cutting-edge technologies by giving them grants. They tell them, they direct them. You don't get a grant and say, I'll go off and do this with it. No, that's not how science has ever worked. They all make their living off grants, and they're told what direction to go in. And perhaps sometimes they're told what the purpose is, not very often. Because all the information that they glean from all the different studies goes upwards and upwards and upwards to the ruling bunch, you see, who then put that knowledge together and find ways to bring about what they claim is their new world order, their utopia, as I say, a place where the fittest will go on. And the reason that you're hearing so much today about sustainability and resources, depletion of resources, all that kind of stuff, this is part of their religion that is very ancient, very ancient. And they do believe that if there were too many of the wrong kind of people, the useless eaters, on the world, gobbling up their resources, they see the world as theirs, then the unfit should be eliminated so that the fittest and their children and their offspring for generations can continue. That's what this is all about. They've used us to bring in this world order, as I say. They've used us for centuries. And we have fought their wars for them. We have standardized the world under one system. They're all identical systems, basically, with central banks under the World Bank, with the same kind of politics, with two parties and so on. It's all been pretty well done. And now they're ready to bring it all together under the global government, which we really are already under. So we're into a very critical phase for ourselves, for myself too. I'm speaking as one of you. I've never had an invitation to come through the portal with them, you might say, into their new order. But we've all apparently to get brought down into dire straits monetarily, only if we believe in national debts. Personally, I don't. I think it's all bunkum. To sit and starve because money stops flowing is a banker's con. If you can still work and make things or do things, there's no reason why you can't continue. But people will sit around and die, literally, if the money is withdrawn. How mad can you be? I mean, how indoctrinated, how incredibly indoctrinated can you be to allow that kind of thing to happen? But people will. Look at the Great Depression. Banks fail in Germany and other places, and suddenly it's supposed to sweep across the whole world because a few banks failed initially, and you're supposed to just give everything back to the banks and jump on your jalopy and look for some tent to live in and starve quietly to death because no money's flowing. Back with more after this. Hi folks, I'm back, and this is Cutting Through the Matrix. Talk about this crazy thing called money, where everything's supposed to stop. We're all supposed to just be terrified that the world's going to collapse because, money's all owed to everyone else, and it just goes round and round. It's all debt money, apparently, and we can't live without it, you see. They can't think of anything better than that system. Isn't that something else? Well, what's a big lie, of course? The fact is they've got to keep the same system going to the bitter end. And what I've noticed is that even in the Army's report for the next 30, 40 years projections, they've said themselves that there'll still be money, there'll still be a debt and banking system, and they've got to protect the economic system, which means they're going to keep this darn system going forever, because they've got to have a population now who believe we're all in trouble for the next 30 to 40 to 50 years. In other words, it's a method of control, and as they take us down, they use this excuse to bring us down. Or there's just no money for hospitals, there's no money for this and no money for that, as they cut us back into a third world status, which was always the intention once they had standardized the whole world. What a great con game, isn't it? What a fantastic con game.